Chapter 51. Presuppositions and Law. All thinking is based on presuppositions which organize and direct thought. The world of factuality gives us quintillion upon quintillion facts which are meaningless unless a premise of organization and meaning exists. Just as Euclidean geometry begins with its presuppositions, certain axioms which govern all things and provide the framework whereby a theorem can be proven, so all thinking in every field has its particular presuppositions. The presupposition of Christian thinking is the triune God and his inscriptured word. The presuppositions of humanism is the mind of man as the ultimate arbiter and judge. Our presuppositions govern our thinking. A false presupposition gives us false conclusions. Every kind of law rests on a presupposition, so that biblical law and humanistic law, while perhaps agreeing on a specific law, that is, thou shalt not kill, means different things thereby. In biblical law, the premise is that God, the creator and governor over all life, can alone decide when and where the taking of life is permissible. In humanistic law, murder may be forbidden where man decides that something should be protected. The protected life may be that of a rattlesnake or of a mountain lion. What is protected is decided by the state in terms of environmental considerations. Where human life is concerned, God's law has a different presupposition than does the state's law. God, as the creator, holds that he alone can govern the taking of life, whereas the state determines what is a tenable killing in terms of its interests. Other factors also govern law. Those who believe in original sin and total depravity will, first, see man as a sinner who must be kept in rein by God's law. Because of his fallen nature, man has a propensity to sin, and he must be kept in check by the law and the penalties thereof. Without the restraint of the law, man will destroy society and create a world of evil and terror. As against this, humanism sees man not as a sinner, but either as naturally good or at worst as neutral. Crime then becomes an abnormality and not the inclination of fallen man. There are variations to this, as witness the Marquis de Sade, who made crime both natural and good and insisted on its recognition as man's true way of life, the natural life. Second, in the Christian perspective, man is a responsible creature, responsible to God, a sinner because he is in rebellion against God. Humanism sees man as a victim and therefore, to some degree, not responsible by virtue of insanity, a bad environment, and evil heredity, a dysfunctional family, and so on and on. Humanism thereby makes the criminal a victim. In my childhood, a man who was regarded as great and as a major pioneer in human thought was Judge Benjamin Barr, Ben Lindsay, 1869 to 1943, Judge of the Denver, Colorado Juvenile Court, 1800 to 1927. He wrote Problems of the Children, 1903, The Beast with Harvey O'Higgins, 1910, The Revolt of Modern Youth with Wainwright Evans, 1935, and The Companionate Marriage, also with Evans, 1927. Judge Lindsay was hailed as a modern prophet and a major shaper of the 20th century, which he was. He was a creator of juvenile law in courts, wherein children would ostensibly be given the fair trial denied them in the adult courts. New courts have always been imperfect before and after Lindsay, but Lindsay assumed a degree of innocence on the part of juvenile offenders. He was a romantic in the school of Wordsworth in his view of children and their innocence, and he saw the legal system as derelict in their treatment. The consequence of Judge Lindsay's legal revolution was apparent by the 1990s. Juveniles as young as 6 and 7 years of age were committing serious crimes. By 1970, according to a police detective in a major city, young teenagers were ready to kill a man for as little as $20. The myth of innocence had protected evil children and youth, and they had exploited the myths also of victimhood. A legal revolution had taken place with corrosive results. The child had come to be seen as only marginally responsible. Responsibility was placed at the door of the family, society, capitalism, heredity, and so on. A prison guard who, circa 1950, worked for a time in a juvenile detention centre said that these juveniles were far more dangerous than convicts. They delighted in evil, whereas veteran criminals had a more pragmatic view. More than a change in attitude concerning juvenile crime had taken place. Adult criminals had also come to be regarded as also only marginally responsible. Earlier, under the biblical perspective, the offence was seen as sin. Now it was called a crime. The concept of sin presupposes a sinner, but this is no longer true of crime because the criminal is seen as a product, not a cause, and the blame is placed on the family, society, capitalism, and other like quote-unquote causes. Social experiments in varying forms of economy and civil polity have not reduced crime because crime has moral foundations and morality as a cause is excluded by modern thought. Our problems, President John F. Kennedy told a university audience early in the 1960s, are now technological, not moral ones. Under that illusion, we have gone from crisis into crisis, trying to spend our way into non-moral quote-unquote solutions that have aggravated our problems. The Romantic movement substituted feelings for moral concerns in the confidence that its feelings represented a higher level of purity than a sin-conceived church could provide. The purity of feeling, so prized by the Romantic poets, has come to its fruition in that the feelings exalted have become more and more degenerate and perverse. The results have been pornography, perversion, and wild criminality. Presuppositions underlie all human thoughts, and presuppositions are inevitably religious. Because religion is the, quote, ultimate concern, end quote, our presuppositions arise out of our ultimate concern. But the presuppositions of fallen man are evil. They are rooted and grounded in original sin, in man's desire to be his own God, knowing or determining good and evil for himself. Genesis 3:5. Thus, when fallen man becomes a lawmaker, he seeks to protect his own ultimacy, his own sin. The laws he then creates have as a given factor his respective persons. They are highly protective of himself and of his allies in sin. The more de-Christianized his system of law becomes, the more partisan and warped it becomes. In time, moral limits are replaced by pragmatism. It's interesting that Burton Hirsch in The Old Boys, The American Elites and the Origins of the CIA, 1992, could say of the influence of a prominent homosexual in American foreign intelligence work from World War I into the 1960s that he reordered the assumptions, quote, according to which Americans did business in the world, end quote. Quote, ethical limits fell away, end quote. Our presuppositions shape our lives and our laws. The common dictionary definition of law is that it is, quote, a binding custom or practice of a community, a rule of conduct or action prescribed or formally recognized as binding or enforced by a controlling authority, end quote. The neglected part of this definition is, quote, by a controlling authority, end quote, because it raises the religious question, who or what is the God of the legal system, man, the state, or the biblical God? This question cannot be avoided legitimately because we then conceal our religious roots, falsify the meaning of law, and disguise the fact of our own unanswered problem. There can be no thinking nor law without religious presuppositions. Without such premises, we simply have a vast realm of meaningless or brute factuality. We renounce then the possibility of meaning. To do so would be consistent thinking, but it would force an honest conclusion on the humanist. He would have to admit his total bankruptcy and ignorance, and this he refuses to do. The world of law is religious because it designates certain forms of behavior as wrong and implicitly evil, and the opposite as permitted and good. Law is inescapably religious, but not necessarily Christian. Law is always the key form of religious expression, and in the modern world, the anti-Christian nature of the laws of nations is concealed by a denial of the religious nature of all laws.